Okay, well, what I did here is I joined this board here on my joiner. If you don't have a joiner, maybe you should get one. I've got a 6-inch Sears joiner. It's very old, but it works. When I say very old, it was probably bought in the 90s. So it's from that era. What I did was, here I put an X right there. I put an X on there because that was the side that was toward the face. I also put an X on the bottom in a similar place right there, because that showed the side that was joined. Of course, this is the rough side. This was cut on a bandsaw mill. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a jig so that I can make bridle joints like this, because these pieces that I've cut here, I'm not going to have them like that, because it makes the assembly too loose and I took off too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add material to it, possibly with birch veneer, and then when I put the joints together, it'll just be an added element of interest. So I'm going to make a jig out of this board and out of other scraps that I have, and so we'll see how that goes. I cut this on the table saw, and I wanted to thin it down because I want it to sit below the surface here in the miter groove, the miter gauge groove. So I made this set up here where I got the saw blade to the height of this runner that's going to go in the miter saw blade, or in the groove here, the table saw groove. And so here goes. I just kept taking a little bit off of it, and now it fits below the surface where I want it. This is going to be for my gauge, or my jig to cut tenons. I wanted to show you this feather board that I made. I'm going to turn the camera so you can see it a little bit better. But this feather board, I took a piece of walnut and I cut small kerfs in it with the bandsaw. You could use a fret saw, you could use a back saw, you could use just a common handsaw, but just cut grooves in it so that these are flexible. And you can see that like this. When I push it like that, you can see how they flex. You need a wood that is somewhat flexible and that can be used in this way. And then I put a slight, not only did I put an angle on it, but I put a slight chamfer here so that the board would feed in there evenly. The next thing I want to do here is I want to take this piece of plywood and I want to make a runner so that this blade, so that this piece of plywood is big enough between the blade and this miter groove right here. So all I got to do is mark it approximately to where it's supposed to be. Then I'll use that as a reference, and I want to cut off a little bit of this piece of plywood because I want it totally even with the saw blade. And that little part at the end, that's where I just nipped a little bit off here, because when you push a piece through the saw, it may not cut the last very little bit right here on this corner. So I just moved it while it was still spinning, while the blade was still spinning. My hand was in a safe place and took off that little corner. Okay, well, I've got this runner on the bottom. I can see I'm going to have to tighten it up some, but I do have it on there at least. And what I did was I lined this edge up with the saw. Now the saw is going to give me a clean, straight edge along there. And then also I countersunk this screw and this screw here so that they would be below the surface. And then I took my sanding block and sanded that area so that that area would not stick up too high. So there's more work to be done. The next piece I'm going to put is not this one, but a similar piece is going to be put up here like this, and then I'm going to have gussets between this piece and this piece here, so that this will be 90 degrees to this. So we'll work on it and see what we got. What I wanted to do is create a straight edge along this edge here. And this is a triple chip blade. It must be somewhat dull because it's supposed to help in cutting melamine, but left a rather rough edge. And I'll take my sanding block and get rid of some of that fuzz that's on there. Now I could, like some of the guys on YouTube, I could draw full-size plans, but I don't do that. I never have. Too much. I sometimes do. But what I'm going to do is I'm I'm going to have this piece here. I'm going to have my runner on the bottom here. Something like that. And then I'm going to have this piece here. I'm going to have it like that. And it's going to have, I should say like this, it's going to be right there. And if you can see, there's a couple of lines on here. This center line is going to be the center of my little runner, because I'm going to have a small runner right here. I cut this off of the previous piece that I had, but I'm going to place that runner right in there, similar to that, because there's another corresponding mark right here. If you can see it, it's kind of difficult to see. Right there. And so I'm going to have a corresponding runner, this same runner actually, but it's going to be a corresponding dado right there. And this little piece right here is going to slide back and forth like this, so that I can extend it out like that if I want to. And then I will have this piece here attached to this in this way. It's kind of difficult to see it. But it's going to be attached to this other little piece, and it's going to be the place where my pieces will ride against. When I get it all together, you'll see what I'm talking about. But right now I'm going to put a dado in this piece here. That's this one here. And this runner is 3/8 thick. So I'm going to put, when you take 3/8 and you divide it in half, that's 3/16. Because 3/16 plus 3/16 is 3/8. And so I'm going to put this up against my fence. I've already measured it. Ready to go. Always use your push block. I have a push block right here. For small parts especially. I'm going to move it over. I have to work on something. Okay, I just decided to run each piece separately rather than try to run both of them at the same time. So I'm going to move this over 1/8 of an inch. I just bump it a little bit until it looks like 1/8 of an inch. I've got my push block right here. Alright, now I'm going to move it another 1/8. Okay, well, this is the piece of wood that I got this dado in, and I can see I'm going to need to file it a little bit. When you have melamine, it gets messed up quite easy. Here you can see where I've sanded all that, and the edges all the way around. Melamine is a sort of a delicate material. But I like the edges sanded. I don't like them sharp so that they can cut you. Everything looks pretty good. It's just a jig. It's not, you know, critical or anything. Now I gotta figure out where the front of this is, because I marked this as the front here on this end, but the end where I marked this, I cut it off by, not by mistake, but sort of a little bit of oversight. Okay, this goes on here like this. Sometimes you have to work with it a little bit. My battery sort of gave out, so I'm using the old electric drill. It's a little bit more reliable. Now what I do is, first of all, there's raised areas right here where the screws came through because of the melamine, so I'm going to sand those, grind those a little bit with my file. And now I'm going to attach this, and the way I do it to reattach something, I'm using 1-inch screws here, but make them so they're just poking through. Then put on your other piece that you're going to attach. And I'm just going to snug them down a little bit because I want to tighten them all together. So just let it come through a little bit. Try to find your hole, your previous hole, and then tighten them down. You got to be careful with screws and take it easy, because you can snap the screw real easy. Once you snap the screw, then it's either very difficult to remove the screw, or drill another hole. So there you go. I'm going to chamfer the front of this runner because it'll fit in the slot easier. But this is just a regular file, nothing fancy. I use a wire brush to clean the area that sometimes gets plugged up with metal chips. I use a file on wood and metal, both. Okay, there I got the runner on there, and then this runner is going to go on like this. This piece that I made over here that's glued, it's going to be attached to this runner, and this dado will be redone. And I'm also going to have to take off the glue and make this part here thinner. I don't know if you can see that on there. And then I've got two shims. These are cedar shims used for construction. And I've got them in there so that I keep this piece up against the dado, the part of the dado that I want it to be kept up against. Then I'm going to just recut that dado.